So now that all 10 episodes of the new Shogun FX series has aired, it's now time for a full series review. And before I get into it, I just want to say that this was such an event that I enjoyed. And it was just fun going through each episode every week and just watching it with you guys almost and just seeing what you guys were thinking. But also this show just really brought up all this interest now in samurai films. So in a way we're sort of in this new golden age for the samurai genre. And I'm just hoping that we could get a lot more samurai content. We'll see. Anyway, what did I think of Shogun 2024? Well, I'll say, like many of you, it definitely has its ups and downs. But if you just take a look at the reviews, they're overwhelmingly positive. Like, it's almost insane. Could it be because it's been so long since we've had anything good? And that goes for television or movies. There's been a lot of bad shows lately. Maybe this one just stands out. And in many ways, this show could be a masterpiece just compared to the trash that we've gotten recently.
Yes, this is wonderful. Raise your arms!
And as to what the best adaptation of the story is, there really isn't a perfect answer. But maybe just watching each one will benefit you. And obviously the novel just encompasses everything you could want from the story. So if you're going to start anywhere, definitely start with the novel. It's the main source that all these come from. And that's as full as an experience as you're going to get. But I also understand that it's very long. And believe it or not everyone's a fan of reading novels. So that'll bring you to the next option, the 1980 miniseries.
I am not a barbarian. Watashi wa samurai.
And that one focuses more on the character of John Blackthorne. But it leaves out the Japanese characters and a lot of their point of view. And then we have Shogun 2024. And that focuses more on Tanaga and the Japanese characters. But as a consequence, it leaves out John Blackthorne and his backgrounds. And a lot of people have just pointed out that this new adaptation was sort of afraid of just the criticism it'll get from focusing too much on the white protagonists. And they were afraid of being accused of being a white savior story. But the joke's on them because those same people are still complaining.
And your hair looks like the tail of a pony!
But this sort of modern censorship, in a way, forced the show to focus more on the character of Toranaga. And just to focus too on more of the Japanese politics. And in fact, the show is actually mostly in subtitles due to it being more Japanese. But I will say they do have an English dub and it's surprisingly well made. But also by putting John in the background, it sacrificed a lot of his story elements. And for example, the supposed love story with him and Mariko is almost non-existent. Same with the drama with the Portuguese. And that whole storyline too is pretty much non-existent in the entire show. And some characters really just suffered as a result of John being pushed to more of a secondary character. Mariko suffered the most, because now she just seems cold. And she's not that warm, charismatic character that we saw in the novel, or even the 1980 series.
You are here. This is your home.
And actually the 1980 version is sort of a mirror opposite to this new one. The old show focused entirely on John. And this was to the point that the entire show was in English. And if anyone spoke Japanese, we wouldn't know what they were saying. And they did that on purpose to make it seem like we were in the protagonist's shoes.
My husband asks you to excuse him, but he must talk to me in private.
But its main goal was to make the audience relate to John. To just imagine being like him in this alien, unknown world. But the 2024 adaptation went for a much darker setting, and it was more so about political fighting. And it was very much in the vein of Game of Thrones. It had a lot of tragic deaths and betrayals. And the main character in this adaptation is really Tanaga. And he's a Japanese warlord that's based on the real-life Tokugawa Ieyasu. And the main conflict of the show is mainly his battle with the other regents that want to overthrow him. And I find that as a result of Tanaga being the new protagonist, because of that, he is now different in this adaptation. For one, he's more likable, and he seems more humane. Where the Toranaga in the novel, and also Toshiro Mifune's version, he was much more like a warlord, much more like Tokugawa Ieyasu. And deep down, he really wasn't a good guy. He was just the best option for John's survival, so we rooted for him. You could tell he really wouldn't hesitate to kill you if he saw an advantage to it. And even though Sanada is just a brilliant actor, I ultimately don't think he was the best choice for Toranaga. And like I said, that's because he's too likable. And maybe just Sanada in real life is too likable of a guy. You know, that's a compliment. He's also one of Japan's most famous actors. And he's appeared in many Hollywood films. In fact, it's almost a requirement to have him, or even Ken Watanabe, in any Hollywood movie that has Japanese people or samurai. So it's obvious that he was going to be cast in the show, and he should have been. And he's really the only Japanese actor with just the fame and appeal that could match Toshiro Mifune's. But again, he just seems different to the novel's Toranaga. And because we're now following Toranaga's point of view a lot more closely, because of that, the Portuguese antagonists from the previous series and novel are now pretty much pushed aside. And this is because they had more so to do with John. And now that we're not following him as much, now they don't really have much of a purpose. And ultimately, this show should have just had 2 seasons. I don't understand why they had to cram this massive book in only 10 episodes. It wasn't enough. So because of that, it forced them to pick only one storyline. And I don't understand that. I know people watch this, it would have done well with 2 seasons. You know, why not just have the entire storyline comprised into one adaptation? And now if we want the full story of Shogun, we have to watch the 1980 series, and then we have to watch this one. And I'm not saying that John isn't in the 2024 adaptation, but he's definitely pushed aside. And because of that, his character is a little different. He seems more isolated, and it's just sad because he's now hated by pretty much every character in the entire show. And it's very telling that throughout the show, he's begging to be able to leave. And because of that, his love story with Mariko is cut short. In a way, it misses what the key aspect of the story is. It was a story that was written by James Clavell, and obviously he's not Japanese, but it was a story from a Westerner's point of view. A foreigner ending up in this mysterious new world, and also just falling in love with a woman there, Mariko. And it was just a great story because Mariko was also a pretty complex character too, because she's also caught between 2 worlds. She was a devout Catholic, but she's also Japanese. And with this new adaptation, I just didn't get that same aspect of a cultural divide and just the fascination with it. I feel like this was definitely their biggest miss. But I still don't believe that this show is bad. I know some reviewers just want everything to be simple. Either you love it or hate it. And I will admit, some things are like that. Some things you either love or hate. But Shogun 2024 does do some things better. For one, it's just very well made. The production value, I have to say, is incredible. And it's just nice to see that a show was allowed to be given a really nice budget. And I also like how just a ton of research went into this adaptation. And I've heard some historians just really praising it. And just from the castles to the architecture, the costumes, a lot of things were just historically accurate. Admittedly, some things weren't, like how the swords hang. I heard that was an artistic choice, but still, just a lot of work went into it. And the effects were pretty incredible. And there was even an earthquake scene, and just that one scene alone had the production quality of an actual movie. And they just made it look as incredible as possible, just that one quick scene. So really, there's nothing cheap about this show. It even had big name actors. Like I said, Hiroyuki Sanada, he's probably Japan's most famous actor. And he's also famous in Hollywood. And I'm also glad too that it had Tadanobu Asano. And I like how they gave him a big role in this. And I was afraid he was gonna die in like the first episode, but he was given a lot of screen time. And in my opinion, he was the best actor in this show. And his character was also my favorite. And I've seen a lot of people in the comments also say that. And I'll probably rewatch the show just for his performance alone. And I'd love to see a prequel to the show with him, Omi, and Buntaro.
石に当たって頭が割れるとはの。わしが思うておった死に様ではなかった。下がってよい。はっ。
And I will say, most of the actors in the show did do a great job. And even Jarvis as John Blackthorne, I thought he did a pretty decent job.
Yes, this is wonderful.
I did hear some people criticize him, but to me personally, I thought he was pretty convincing. And also just the action scenes and fighting choreography, I thought they were really well done. I could have definitely used more of it, but, you know, that's another story. And I especially appreciated just some of the few over-the-top gore sequences. I thought they just went very well with the very violent Sengoku time period. And I liked too the episodes that would just end with one shocking killing. I thought that was well done. Usually it involved a betrayal, and it sort of made you anticipate it for the next episode. And also some of the cultural customs were pretty well done. We got to see a pretty great example of a tea ceremony, and there was also some pretty nice haikus and poetry. But I will say I wish we did have more stuff like that. And now for the negatives. And as many of you have pointed out, this adaptation does stray a lot from the novel. And that's not always a bad thing because not everything should translate from a novel to a show. But the problem is, some of these changes were bad, and even weird. And I mentioned how the Portuguese drama with John was pushed to the side, and because of that, it takes some things away from John's character. Just in showing that he could be as clever as Toranaga. And I could see this being a flaw for most novel purists. But actually for me personally, I could really live without the storyline. In fact, this was actually my least favorite thing about the book, and even the 1980 series, especially in the 1980 series. And that's because I just found it tiresome the way Europeans and Christians are depicted as these cartoony villains. You know, we've all seen it a million times, it's old by now. And like I said, the 1980 series especially did this aspect really bad. And almost to a hilarious level. And I'm actually pretty surprised that this new version skipped over some of this. And I honestly thought for sure that they were going to focus on more of the evil Christian white narrative. So, in a way, this is a positive, at least for me. And I was also surprised too that it didn't focus more on some of the more sexual aspects of the novel. And if you read it, you'll know what I mean. And there were plenty of opportunities for this to be brought up. Again, I thought they were just going to focus mainly on those two things. But surprisingly, there was little to none of that. And I have to give this show credit for not doing that. Usually, you know, sex is an easy sell. When your story is bad, just have that and violence. You know, easy. And even just considering that the show has referred to itself as the Japanese Game of Thrones. So again, this may not be a flaw, for me it's a positive, but for others it might be. And a lot of people were upset with this show's lack of romance. And it's true, while the novel didn't really focus on that, it still had plenty of romance in it. And I will say it was a big part of both Mariko and John's relationship. And it's kind of funny because in my review of the 1980 version, I complained that it took up too much time. But now with this version, I'm complaining that there's not enough. So maybe you can't please me. And the few fight scenes that the show had looked really good. You know, it was very well choreographed. But there was only a few, and it just desperately needed at least one big battle scene. And that would have just been so much more impactful. And I just thought it would be an amazing opportunity to have a recreation of the Battle of Sekigahara. I would have loved that. So anyway, I wasn't happy with everything in this show. I thought it definitely could have done some things better, and it did make some mistakes. So it wasn't perfect, obviously, but it did do some good things, and I did enjoy it. And I'll say that it's one of the better shows in recent years. And maybe that's just because we're used to bad shows and movies. Either way, I still could say that I still got some enjoyment out of watching it. And it was just fun dissecting every episode week by week. And it was even better with you guys in the comments. And I learned a lot. But I also like how this show is bringing more interest into samurai. So if this does well, hopefully we could get more samurai adaptations after this. I'd love to have an adaptation of Eiji Yoshikawa's Musashi novel. I think that would even be better than this. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you thought of the series as a whole. Did you like it, or did you hate it, or were you in the middle? And maybe you were just like me, you just liked some aspects and disliked others. And if you really want to discuss it, I do have a free Discord, and we do plenty of discussions like this and many more. And everyone's free to join. Also, if you want to keep this channel afloat, I do have a Patreon, and that's how you can support me. And like always, thanks for watching.